All right, here we are. It's the thing. What is that called? Wednesday. So this is the Web API 3 challenge. So where we're at is Greg has done some coding already. He's got a custom logger function, but we need to do some work in our index.js to actually start the server and tell it where to listen. So what do you got, Greg? What do we need to write in here to get us started? What's missing?
So before we get to that, this is what they gave us with the project, the server. Okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure that that was correct. All right, cool. So the index, boom. So in here, we need to do the required information. It's eluding my mind right now.
So this is, we're going to do our importing. We're bringing in the server information with the require syntax, like you mentioned.
Right. Right, but the actual syntax itself is eluding my mind. But I think I got it. Hold on, I think I got it. And challenge myself. Const.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We're going to save it to a constant. Just give it a name.
Express, because Express is already imported through npm, so that's why I can do this. Require, and in that require parentheses, and then as far as that parameter, we're going to pass in Express.
Yep.
Then we go to that next step where we would const, and we would actually declare a server, and we give up the server, and then we invoke Express. All right.
So let's take a look. Let's put it side by side. Let's move server over here. So we're looking at server and index side by side.
Okay.
Okay, cool. So server is exporting something. So server is already set up with Express. We got our module import here. We got the function running, and we're listening on this endpoint already, and we're exporting this. So over here, we don't even need to do this work. We've already done this work. We just need to import the server right here.
Okay, so.
Right, so we can say const server equals require server.
Const server require server. So we don't have to do this part right here.
No, we don't need Express in the index because Express is already running our server.
Okay. So we could do const server require.
Yep. And so what we're passing into require is going to be a path to find that file, this server.js file. And it's going to be passed in quotation marks like a string.
So that file would be in the same folder. No, it's outside the folder.
It's in the same folder, you're right. Okay, so now you're going outside. So you just need one dot.
Yeah, that's always the thing right there. So one dot, and then we go straight to the server.
Boom, there it is. Cool, so now you got all that good stuff going on. So now we just need to tell the server to start up. We're gonna tell the server to listen.
Okay, so then that would mean that we would do server.listen.
Yep.
And then we would pass it two parameters. The first parameter would be the port that we put it on. I always use 5000. And then we would pass in a callback function. And the callback function would contain a console log of what we want to say in the console to show that the server is running, correct?
That's exactly right.
And then we pass in a string and say, hey, I'm running on port 5000. Cool.
All right, so we're going to do something even cooler, is we're going to make that message dynamic, and we're going to make our port dynamic, because we want to get away from hard coding these values, especially when we get to the point to deploying stuff. All this stuff needs to be dynamic. So we're going to do another
Why is it
variable
giving
up
me an
here.
error? Oh, I know why. All right, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so you said we want to make the message dynamic, we want to make the port dynamic. So if we do that, then I guess we would have to declare a variable called port.
Yeah, exactly.
And here we would equal it to 5000.
Yeah, let's call it 5000. In the
Okay.
future, this could be a variable. It could be a .env file. There's many things that you could use here. But for now, I just want us to get used to like using this as a variable and passing it in as a dynamic thing that's going to render dynamically here in the text.
Okay, so that means that we would pass in port here.
Yep.
And in the text, we will replace this with port and with backticks maybe.
Yeah, definitely backticks.
Okay, so that means I would have to put backticks on the entire string.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And replace that with.
That's that funny looking syntax. Yep,
Yeah.
the cache.
And then port. Okay, cool.
Very cool.
You can also put your HTTP there. Instead of seeing hey, I'm running on there, you can put your HTTP there.
Here?
Like right before port.
Mm-hmm.
The port that you have.
Correct, I got you.
Yeah, right before that, you're going to want to put your HTTP method. It'll just be like, hey, I'm running on localhost port, and then it'll just instantly put it in there. And then once you save it, you can just click it instead of typing in your whole thing to see if your port is actually running.
So just like that, correct?
Yeah.
That will work. All right, so we got our server up and running. Let's start it up.
Okay.
So inside our terminal here.
Okay. So we do npm run server.
Yep.
And it crashed.
Ooh, express is not a function.
Oh, really?
Let's check out the package. Let's make sure we got it in here. Got keywords. Let's see dependencies.
Express right there.
All right. What's happening in server.js 3? Let's check scroll up a little bit in this server.js file.
Oh, is it? For some reason, it's.
Oh, here we go. All right, do you see it, Greg?
Yeah, it's declared. It's declared right here. And
I
then.
mean, we got to fix this though. We're missing just one word. We're missing that word require.
And if it's required, it has to be in parentheses, correct?
Yeah, so require is like a function that takes in like a string.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that should.
Cool.
Okay. And now it's running.
Nice.
You can actually click the running part too to see if your first get is working. Full click.
And it opened up somewhere. Yay. Let's write some middleware. It worked.
Cool.
Awesome.
All right, let's go.
So let's see. We got the logger middleware. So we got this beautiful function that you wrote out here, which looks awesome. And where are we calling that function? Where are we using this logger middleware?
It's actually not being used anywhere right now because I didn't do server.use.
Cool, let's install it. Let's use it.
So here's the question now. Since we imported the server into index.js and then we got it to listen, where would we put the server.use? In the server file itself?
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
Because this is where all the action is happening.
All right.
Yeah, so this is just a basic config, just a bare bones. The index.js file is going to be the main file your program is running. And that file is actually server.js. So this is, get used to this. We're abstracting things. We're making everything more modular, all these different components, interlocking stuff. It's not that scary. You just got to trace your imports and exports and just like kind of keep the big picture in mind.
Okay.
But yeah, this server.js, this is where all the fun stuff is happening. So this is where we want to run our middleware. And remember, this code is going to run sequentially. So if we want the middleware to run on this endpoint, we're going to have to install it above that.
Oh, yeah, because it would go that way. All right, cool. And then we include it in there by the function name. So we put in logger.
Yep.
Okay.
Cool. So looking good so far. Let's test it out with the Insomnia client. And just verify that we're hooked up and our logger is running.
Alrighty then. So let's bring this Insomnia over. And we will pass in, let's see. And pass in HTTP localhost 5000, which is the home route.
Yep, that's the root. So let's see what we get back. 500. Oh no, what is this?
RIA is not defined.
So it's telling you exactly where it's coming from, although a little hard to see. Server.js at line 16. Let's see.
Oh, typo.
Aha, good eyes.
Okay, so now we bring that back up and run it again. There we go.
Nice. Okay, and let's see. We should get that message in our terminal too from the console log.
Okay, so let us pull in a
Nice. Got your timestamp and all that funky information about the URL.
Hey, Ian, I'm gonna head out. Sorry, my headache came back.
All right, Cecinos, get well soon. Thanks for chilling.
So I'm not getting that.
Oh, so it's coming out. If you look in your VS Code terminal, it's not going to come through the browser because remember, the server is not running on the browser.
Right, true. So it's running on it.
Yeah, your console logs that you write in an Express server, they're going to come out in the terminal where you actually ran the server.
Okay.
So this is beautiful, man. You got this UTC timestamp here. You got the information about the type of request and where it's going to. And let's see, from undefined.
So that was an error. That was an error that Ryan had in the training kit. So I don't know. He didn't figure out why it wasn't working, and I definitely don't know why it wasn't working. He had that same thing when they was trying to use Origin.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that rec.get origin syntax. I have no idea what's going on there. So we're just not even going to worry about it because this is pretty good. We got a timestamp, we got the type of request, and we got the rec.url, the method, and the timestamp. And that's what MVP is calling for. So boom, goal number 1, complete. We already did that. So what's the next thing up? Validate the user ID. That's the next piece of middleware we got to write.
Okay.
So, all right. So let's just keep clunking them down. Just keep chugging down the line here and write ourselves another function.
Okay. Validate user.
Yep. Validate user ID. Let's start with that. I'm just going down the list, literally top to bottom on the instructions here. Okay, cool. So I like this ES6 syntax you got going on here, but there's one problem that we're going to run into. Does anybody know what it is? If we do server.use validate user ID up here, what's going to happen?
Oh, it's going to run it's going to run on everything.
Going to override it.
Well,
isn't this a hoisting issue or something?
This is a hoisting issue. So what's the difference between this and this?
It's got to pull function before it goes to the .use. Is that right?
Okay, so these are both valid ways to write functions, but they're very different ways to write functions, and they have different rules. So when you do a function declaration like this gets hoisted. That's why you can call this function above where it's actually declared. But this is a function expression. And this does not get hoisted. This only exists where you've written it. You're declaring it right here. You're saying const validate user is an expression which evaluates to something.
Right. So I have to go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to point this out because this is a perfect way to demonstrate this. So if we wanted to write this down here and use it up here, we have to change this function syntax.
So you have to change it back to this way.
Yeah, we have to change it back to the function declaration.
Okay.
And Ian, something I was kind of confused about is, are we writing them here or in the user router.js file? Because they're already written out in that file.
Yes, Reed, good point. So we're actually not going to write it here at all. We're actually going to use our user router. And look at all this funky stuff. He's got all these endpoints scaffolded out. Very nice. So I guess really the first thing to do is let's install this router. Oh yeah, he's got them all out here. This is awesome. Yeah, Reed, thanks for bringing that up. So let's see. We need to go back to our server, and we need to import this router into our server, the same way we did in the index.
All right, so I can take this out because this will throw an error.
Exactly.
And then I go to user router, and up here, above, I have to express router. I have
Well,
to
hang on.
import it.
We want to be working in the server.js file right now. Because server, this is our brains, right? This is what's listening. So inside of our server, we need to import our router. We need to import user router so we can use it in here and set it up on our server.
Okay, so I have to import the user router into here.
Yes.
Okay, so let's see. So it's exported as router. So then I say const router.
Yep.
Const router is equal to require, and then bring it in. Bring in the path of the file.
Exactly.
So it is not in the same folder. It should be in the same folder. Yep. And then I'll bring in user router. All right.
Beautiful. So now we're importing it. Now we need to put it to work and actually turn it on.
So user router. Yeah, I got to get this. And it's express.router is not a function in here. Express.router is not a function.
So we've got the same typo. I think, yeah.
That was done.
Samantha pointed this out, that this same bug is in a lot of these files. And I said that Luis loves to put bugs in the code. It's just something to do. What do you do in the morning? Put bugs in the code. So you have something to do in the afternoon. Thank you, Luis.
All right, so it's imported into the server, so it can be used into the server. Now, there is something else that we would have to do in order to make the server, to make it look at the router.
Yep, and it's going to be server.use.
Exactly. Should we keep the server.use all together? Yes, we should. So right here, server.use, and
all right, this is great because we just talked about this. This is the hoisting thing again.
Oh, so, but it's a.
You just have to write it below that import statement.
Yeah, because it gotta import it first. Okay.
Or you have to move this to the top, which I would recommend doing that. You know, keeping your imports at the top. That's a pretty good workflow to stick with.
Yeah. Okay, so now server.use router. Not there though.
So the syntax that we're going to do is we're actually going to tell it, we're going to do 2 arguments again. And the first argument, much like this one, is going to be an endpoint. And so that'll be the root endpoint for our router. So let's see, what is that supposed to be here? API, I guess API/users, I think is what it's supposed to be. I'm guessing. Well, we're making it up, so yeah, let's do API/users. Sounds pretty standard. Yeah, I don't see it explicitly stated in the instructions anywhere. Correct me if I'm wrong, but API users is pretty generic.
And do we have to import what we gave it as a variable, what we named it as a variable? So we would say, I mean, the second argument would be router, correct?
Yeah, exactly. So what this is telling is you're saying, server, when I get a request to this endpoint, send it to this router.
Okay.
So this is the same, very much the same syntax as this, right?
Similar, yes.
It's really the same concept, because what's going to happen is that rec and res are going to get sent through here. And then you're going to deal with them in the router.
Okay.
The homies. All right. So we got our router working. So let's set up just a get on the base endpoint here. And just get data flow and make sure we got our router hooked up correctly. So let's just do get slash here. Let's just program this one out. And
So
then
we
we'll
got
take a little break.
So we got another error. It said router is declared already.
Oh, let's see.
I think you left 2 of them in the server JS.
Uh-oh. Yeah, let's check it out.
There's one on 9 and one on 2.
Aha. Yes, we just need to get this out of here. Line number 9 needs to go.
Yeah, that must have auto imported. All right, so let's see. Okay, cool. So he said now we have to check to see if the router is working correctly.
Yeah, so we're just going to start. We're going to write out this function. That's where we're going to start. It's just a get request on the root, which we just determined is going to be /users. So what are we going to do when we get a get request to /users? I guess we'll just return the list of users, right? So let's check it out. We got our helper functions in this user DB. So let's open this to the side of our user router, because this is what we're going to reference to actually fill in all these functions on the router. Cool. So yeah, that's the function that we want to use. And we also need to import all of these functions.
So then that means that we would import this file right here.
Yep. So much the same as we're doing these other imports. We just need to const userdb equals require userdb.
Okay. Just want to make sure. Let me put my import up at the top. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, so watch this syntax right here, because you're getting a red squiggly. We just need to take the dot out of there.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous, that's all, because I know the world is watching.
The world is watching. That's right. This recording is going to live on Slack for the next few weeks. And then it'll be buried.
I couldn't do it, man. I admire that. I couldn't even do this. So.
You got this, Greg.
Yeah, I'm going to keep pushing forward. I'll fumble along the way, but I'll make it through.
Just remember,
You've been good.
just remember, you're asking questions. Everybody is wondering. So
Yeah.
just keep going. You got this.
Yeah, you're doing great, Greg.
Yeah.
You got it, Greg. You're in control.
Yeah.
Look at my team. That's what I like. All right, now I'm smiling.
Yeah. Yeah, we're all in the same team here. Team learn stuff. Talking code.
Let's go.
All right. So now we got it. Now we got to go with it over to here. So we're going to call on our database.
Right.
We're going to say userdb.get.
Okay, so since we did the router, since we set up the router already, then we just automatically call it user db.get, and then I'm questioning user db.
This is a function, okay? So here's what's happening. We're importing all of these functions, and so you're just calling this function. Userdb.get.
Yeah, I was thrown off a little bit because the other day for the get function we used the find, and then we used the find by ID. So I thought for some reason those was like standardized functions.
No, this is, again, Luis is messing with you. He's changing the semantics of the projects every day so that you can't just copy and paste stuff.
That's awesome.
That's intentional. It
Muscle
forces you to rewrite it.
Muscle memory. Let's go.
Yeah, so does that make sense? You're just calling this function that you're importing from userdb. This is your little helper file right here.
Right.
And so what this is going to give you is it's going to return some data. And so what happens is you got your .then, .catch. And .then is going to handle this data that's being returned.
Right. So you do a .then, and we want the user, and we would then do the code block, and the code block, if we get it successful, res.status with what do you call that? The number. I know the number. I just forgot what I called it.
200 for victory. Yes.
Okay, victory, and then we want to put it in the JSON format because we want it to be nice. And the thing that we're calling is the user, so we want that user information in the JSON format.
Beautiful.
Okay. And then we can put a colon on that one. And outside the then, we could do a .catch. That's according to the README.
Yep, that's exactly the flow. So what's happening is that userdb.get is returning some data, or it's returning an error. So if you've got data returning, .then gets called. .catch is going to be catching any exceptions that are being thrown. Any error that happens will immediately go to .catch.
Okay.
So it's basically like a success failure thing.
Cool. So then we do the error. And we space, not an add, that. Cool. And then we do res.status when it comes back. And then we put a service code of 500, because that's what it usually is, and .json. So we can get that error message. We put that message in the JSON format. And it usually is an object that we pass it with a message. So I don't see what we would say, but I guess it would say users couldn't access users or something like that.
Yeah, that's fine. Just kind of a generic error message.
Okay.
Could not get users.
Message.
In the future, you know, you'll get more specific and more exacting with these kind of error messages. But for these toy projects, for this first, couple of weeks of working on stuff, focus on the logic and the functionality.
Okay.
The most important thing is just to make sure you know the difference. And the major difference is mainly going to be in the status codes. Having some extra text here can help you. And certainly you want to think about communicating with the client. You want to send as much information to the client as possible. But don't stress too much about writing a perfect error message. Just put any old thing in there.
Okay.
Just for now.
All right.
The most important thing is learning all the rest of it and how it works. And then we can talk about splitting, into little helpful bits like error messages once everything is up and running.
Cool. Okay.
So let's test this out.
So then that means we would do this thing here. We would do a GET request, and we could do a GET request to users. Yeah, API. I think that's what it was. No, not there. Here. We do users. Yep. /users. /user. Okay. /users. And then we got our users. There we go.
Beautiful. All right, so let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and start building out some more of this middleware.
Okay, awesome.
Yep, it's about that time. Is that the call to prayer?
Yeah, that is the call to prayer.
All right, Joe. Well, then let's make it 10.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
10-minute break, and then we'll come back here.
I appreciate that very much.
Here, I'm gonna cancel your screen sharing, and just share a little 10-minute timer here.
All right, see you guys.
Oh, that's not the one. All right, Greg, are you back? There he is. I see him.
Yeah, I'm back.
All right, let's get back at it. Good break. Very relaxing.
Yeah.
Got a good stretch in there. I hope everybody else did too.
Okay, let's move forward.
Yeah, so we got the next middleware. We're going to validate the user ID.
So just out of curiosity, I'm trying, okay, validate. Okay, cool. There's the instructions. All right, I got it now.
Excellent. Would you share your screen, please?
Oh, I thought I was. There we are. Back at it. We good?
Got you. Thank you. All right.
All right,
So yeah, here's where we're at. We're going to validate the user ID, and he's got some instructions here for us. We're going to validate the user ID on every request that expects a valid user ID parameter. If it's good to go, we're going to store that user's information on the request object. And if it's bad, we're going to send back status 400. Bad request. Cool. So as we discussed, we're going to set up this middleware just on our user router because this is the only set of endpoints that's really going to need this functionality. So let's scroll to the top. Let's put our middleware at the top of this file here because it's actually going to be happening before a lot of these endpoints. So just visually, I would say right up here would be a good place to start writing this middleware.
okay.
So we're going to use our function declaration syntax, and we're going to say function validate user ID and tell it what the heck to do. All right, now we got a beautiful canvas to work with. There are 3 important things that need to go inside these parentheses. What are we talking about? The homies.
Right. Or as Lewis says, the 3 amigos.
The 3 amigos. That's right, there's 3 of them. Because this is middleware. So next is just going to pass on to the next. All right, so what are we doing here? We're going to validate our user ID. So we're going to have to open our minds and play make-believe for a minute. We got to make believe that there's some kind of client sending a request. And we got to make believe that on that request there is an ID parameter.
Mm-hmm.
So right here, we're going to say we want to make sure that that rec object has this ID parameter.
So we would do rec. And is this a good practice to do this? To destructure it? And
Yeah, that's a fine way to do it.
equal it to rec dot rec dot
Body.
body.
The body of the request body. Yeah, because there's a lot of stuff on request.
So body and not params.id.
Well, all right. So that's a good point. I think that's rec.params.id might be a better way to go, Greg. I think you're right. Dan, you're good at this bend in your mind make-believe thing, dude. Yeah, because that's a good point. Anything that's going to call this user ID function more than likely, we want to be pulling the user ID straight out of the URL.
Right.
So yeah, that's an excellent point to make. All right, so we've got this ID. The next thing we want to do is validate it, and if it's valid, return the user object. Now, I think a lot of people got hung up on this set of instructions, but what this means to me, and so what we're going to do with this instruction is we're going to actually ping the database and try to get this user object. So let's check out our UserDB and see what kind of functions do we have. Okay, get by ID. So that's exactly what we want to do here. We want to call get by ID. Yep, exactly right on that UserDB. Get by ID and pass it the ID. .then.catch.
So it said if it is successful, no, it said we want validates the user ID on everyone. Okay, we got that. If the ID parameter is valid, store the user object as rec.user. So if it's valid, then we want a status of 200. And
okay, so let's back up here because we don't actually want to send our response object yet.
okay.
This is just middleware. So the middleware is going to pass it on to something else.
All right.
If it's successful, we want to save the user to rec.user. So that's what we're going to do inside our .then.
So we save the user to rec.user. So then that, how will we do that? Something like this, user equal rec.user.
Yeah, except the other way around, because rec.user is going to be a property on our rec object that we're creating, and we want to assign that the value of user.
Okay. All right. So
Cool.
that's then rec.user is equal to user. Let's store the user object as rec.user. Okay. All right.
And then we're going to call our next, because that's the ideal situation for this piece of middleware, is that it's going to validate the user, it's going to store the user, and then it's going to call next. My job is done.
And that would pass it. And that would pass it on to. That would pass it on to the. It would pass it on to the request. Correct.
It'll pass it on to wherever it's going. So kind of, you know, what we're doing is like, if you want to get the post by a certain user, we're going to stick this middleware in there so that it intercepts the request and it checks, is that user valid? And if it is valid, then it'll go on and run the rest of this code.
Right. Right.
And that's what happens with .next. It says run the rest of the code. Do the next thing. Yeah, but we do need a .catch, because the .catch is where we're going to do this status 400 condition, because that's a failure condition.
Sarah, res dot status, pass in the 400, and JSON, and then pass in a message that's says message invalid user ID. Cool. So it looks like we finished with that one. We finished with that function. So now on the user ID is validate user. So on that get route, we would have to pass it in to here.
You got it.
And then on this route, we would say, I guess we don't have to do that yet. No.
Well, yeah, let's go for it because we do want to test out this middleware. So let's go ahead and write this out. Let's look in our user DB and see how do we get one specific user. So get by ID. Okay, so let's think about this. We've already run get by ID. Sorry, not there. But inside the middleware, we've already run get by ID. So logically, we can presume that if we're hitting this and we're running the code in here, then we've already got the user information on rec.user.
So then I guess we would just do a res.status then.
I think that's a safe way to go.
Because everything else, including the promise, is already run up here. So we just pass this in. This should check the promise. If it's not correct, it'll come down here. If it's correct, it'll allow us to go on to what you just said, onto the thing. So we just need to make sure we pass on a message.
Yeah, so at this point, we're going to respond, send that response object, status 200 for victory, and return rec.user. And probably put that in a JSON object, like the other stuff.
JSON. And then we pass in rec.user. Okay.
All right, this is the exciting part. Now we get to test it out.
All right, so that's by ID. So let's see if we can get an ID. And you come back. Cool. So now let's do a new request. What are you doing there? All right, get. And we're doing it by users, ID, just so we know what we're doing. We set that up. Then we pass in HTTP localhost on 5,000 users, and let's grab the third user, and it's hanging. So that means that next,
I think we need a return statement. I think that might be where we're hanging up here.
Were you doing API/users?
Nope.
Oh,
We just have /user straight up,
oops,
going straight into the router here.
Never mind. I'm sorry.
so usually when it hangs like that, that means that there is no next statement, but we have a next statement in the middleware.
So what I'm thinking is we need to return next, or return this error code. I think that's what's missing from this function here.
Facts. I never saw next returned in the TK. So so return here. Just put a return statement.
Yeah, so that's going to be for the failure condition. We want to return this result, this res object, status 400. And then we also want to return this next function.
Okay. All right. So with that done, let's try it.
Hang on. On line 11, that's what we want to return.
I could have swore I just put that in there.
Well, it's up here on line 10. We just need it to be, we need to return the next.
All right, cool. All right, so we're running again. And it's still hanging. So it's still hanging. All right, what didn't I do?
So let's send a GET just to the user's endpoint and just make sure the rest of the server is operating normally. So that's good to go. So ID 3 should bring us Meridoc Brandybuck. I'm assuming that's some sort of hobbit.
All right, yeah, those are hobbits.
I think Brandybuck was one of the uptown hobbits. They looked down on Bilbo. All right, let's see. What do we got here? It's just hanging. It's just hanging loose. All right, so what is wrong here? All right, so let's try an experiment. On our Git endpoint, let's take out the middleware. On the Git ID. Yeah, so let's just, actually, that's not going to help us at all. All right, what are we going to do here? How are we going to find this bug? Why is it hanging up?
Where's that status? Everything syntactically is correct. Rec.user. Return rec.user. Rec.user is correct. Right there. So we return a rec.user. Next is correct. Validated. Error. Return res.status. Everything is connected and chained.
Let's see. So we're sending it to the users, and it seems like, all right, so let's write a console log in here. Let's make sure that it's even getting to our middleware. And let's console log ID right here.
So console log ID.
Yeah.
So should I stop this? I don't have to stop the server for you to be able to see it. It should just come up, right?
Well, we have to send a request. So let's pop open Insomnia and send some information over there. All right, Reed said his is working even without the returns. JT says same. What is going on with our little server here? Maybe it's just taking its sweet old time.
Hey, Greg, can you cancel the request and then go back to your code? And then scroll all the way up on the user router.js? Okay.
What's going on here?
Is it this? Is it? No, it can't be that function.
I do have my express.router above my user DB. I don't know if that changes anything, but
I don't think that should matter because, I mean, user DB's only being used like inside the functions, and router is not even used except for these endpoints down here. Do you guys have all these empty endpoints in your file?
I have mine commented out.
Yeah,
okay, so let's try that. I think that might be what's hanging us up. Let's just comment out all these endpoints, scaffolded endpoints here. Oh crap! You know what? You know what I forgot is that Reed pointed out he's got all the middleware scaffolded down here too. So this is the problem. I don't think it's the endpoints. It's the fact that validate user ID has already been declared down here and it's doing absolutely nothing.
Oh, yeah, he did say that earlier.
Gee whiz. Okay, so let's just go with Luis's design and let's just copy and paste our code into his functions. Let's just follow his organization. Trying to be slick, man. I forgot that he already set us up. All right.
So let's get rid of that. And go down here. Tab in. All right. And let's try it once again. One more try. Hey.
Beautiful.
Hey, so there we go. So we got it. We got Veridoc.
So now let's send it a garbage ID number. Let's send it ID like 333.
All right.
Sorry, that's not 333 is not a garbage ID number. But you know what I'm saying? One that doesn't exist.
Right, because it didn't get up to 33 users, so I think 33. So no body return.
Okay, so but it's still saying okay. So we need to fix this behavior because it shouldn't tell us it's okay if the user doesn't exist, right?
Oh, right.
So
okay.
this is happening in our middleware, right? Because our middleware, you had one job to validate the user ID. We just need to tweak this a little bit here. So what we need to figure out is what is user? What is this data that's being returned from the database?
So which means that we need the console log.
Yeah, I mean that would be helpful. I think that would provide some useful insight. Yeah, let's do it right here, right? As before we're doing rec.user, let's console log what the heck is user. Well, it's got to be inside the .then statement.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only place it exists.
All right, so let's make a request. And user is undefined.
Undefined. And that was a request to a bad number, right?
Yeah.
So let's make a request to a real number and see what comes back.
So, yeah, we're going to make a request to 3. And it gives us the information.
Cool. So now we know that if it's a bad number, it's going to come back user equals undefined. So what can we do within these curly braces to make a decision based on whether user is undefined or not?
So we would say if user is, well, can we say if user is equal to undefined? If user is strictly equal to undefined? Or if user?
You could just say if user, because undefined is a falsy value in JavaScript.
Right. Question.
So this is a really good idea to put in these console logs because you always want to be checking what kind of data that you're getting back.
Right. So then right here would be where the beginning of the if statement goes.
Well, it has to be within this code block right here because this is the only place where that user exists.
Correct.
Because it's being returned from the database and then you're doing something with it here.
Fat fingers. So if user and then return.
Yeah, then we want to do all this good stuff. This is the success.
Right. Okay, I'll take care of that. And
then we want to put our else condition,
right,
which is going to say that that user ID doesn't exist. So really,
so I have a question. Yeah, because
what's
that's
up?
in the dot, because that's in the dot then, because all of that is in the dot then. But if we say invalid user ID, we had to add another parameter to it to say that the user doesn't exist. So we would do what we would do? Will we do a res.response, another res.response, like 404 or something like that, and then an error message to the user doesn't exist, or we just take the dot catch? But if we do the dot catch is going to be in the dot then, so we got to take it out of that somehow.
So here's what we're going to do. We're just going to take this res status and put it up here, because really this is more appropriate place for it. Because 400 is meaning it's a bad request. It's meaning it's invalid user ID. The database doesn't know what you're talking about. And actually, probably this will be a 404 up here, because really we're saying that ID number is not found.
Yeah, so this is the other parameter that we would have had to add. Okay.
Yeah, and I guess Reed was saying we don't really need these return statements. I don't think it's any harm keeping them in there, but I think it'll work without them. And then, so the dot catch is actually going to catch any errors on the database itself. So this would be, I think, more like a 500 error.
Yeah.
Like it's a problem talking to the database at that point.
Okay.
So we could just copy and paste and dump this in here, change the status code number, change the message a little bit.
Okay.
All right, so moving right along, that should be good to go.
So we need to check to make sure, correct?
Yeah, let's give it a check and just make sure we're getting the status codes we expect to get.
All right. So let's find another user. So we got that user. Now let's add 44. Let's see if we can find 44. Invalid user ID.
Yep.
All right, cool.
The 404.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay.
Awesome.
So, boom, that's 2 middlewares down. And then we got 2 more to go. So let's move on to validate user.
Right. Validate user. So now we need to look into the DB. Validate user.
So, yeah, what's up? Who's got a question?
Hey, JT. Out of curiosity, for the actual like router.get :ID thing, how you have validate user ID in between like the path and the rec and res. Out of curiosity, like why is that the syntax? Because I notice if I take that out, it doesn't actually do anything. Is there any particular reason why, or is it's one of those like, oh well, that's just the way it works kind of thing?
You talking about like
it's just an optional parameter.
Interesting.
So, yeah, I mean, a lot of functions have that. If you look on the MDN docs, it looks real funky, but like on any sort of function, you know, there could be a number of optional parameters that you have access to and you could do something with, but you don't necessarily need to use.
For sure. Thank you.
All right, so we're at validate user. So we're at validate user. There's a validate user validates a body on a request to create a new user. So
Right on.
that means that it would go on it would go probably what on put is update, post is
Well,
a
hang
new
on,
user.
because we're actually not, this has nothing to do with the database. This is going to intercept the request body before we call the database.
Right.
So really, if the request body is missing, or if it's missing the required name field, that's really what we're checking for, and that's all we need to know. Is rec.body, does it exist, and does rec.body.name exist?
Okay. So then we would probably start with declaring the body. So I guess we would do const body equal to rec dot body and const name equal to rec dot body dot name. Correct?
That works, yeah. And then with those two bindings that we just created, we want to make sure that there's data inside there.
Mm-hmm. So that means we will console. We want to. Should we console log it first, just to make sure that we're getting something from it?
I wouldn't worry about that. Let's just jump right into the logic. You know, basically we've got another if-else situation here.
Mm-hmm.
So if this.
So let's talk about it. So if there's no body, cancel the request. And if the body is missing the required name, cancel the request.
So these are two separate if statements.
Exactly. So you could do
So this is if, this is else if.
Right. So if the request body is missing, so if the request body is missing, so if it's no request body, then we can do a res.response. Res.status of 400. JSON format, and do an object that passes in the message. And the message says missing user data. Cool. So that is one. And then we do else if.
Yep.
If I spell it correctly. Else if. And then we do condition. And that condition is if the body is missing the name. So if there's no name, if you don't have a name, you can't get in. All right, cool. And if that's missing, then we return a res.status, and we return a 400 with JSON format of a message, and that message has a key message, and the value is missing required. Name field, cool. F-E-F-I-E-L-D. Guess you have to know how to spell to be a developer. All
Not
right.
really. As long as you spell the code right, you know, you got your JavaScript keywords down.
All right. So then now we want to, if these things exist. So if we want to check to see if the body is there, else if the name is there. If these not named, then we have to do an else statement because we're going to need it to do something else, correct?
Heck yeah. And the else is just to call next. We're good to go.
Right.
I like this project because this is the same logic that went into doing the project yesterday, but we're just abstracting that out and putting it in this little piece of middleware.
Okay. So now we're validating the user. So if we're validating the user, we need now to do what? We need now to validate the post.
Yeah,
we gotta pass it.
Post. So this is going to be almost the exact same logic that we just wrote, except we're looking for a text field instead of a name field. So honestly, at this point, copy and paste. This is the perfect situation. You spent all that time writing this, and it's going to operate in almost an identical way.
Just try to change the one parameter of name to body. Validate post.
Yep, so we got to make sure the request body has a text property on it. Yep, and we'll just change this little error message down right here. And then he wants to see this too.
Missing post data. Cool.
My goodness. All right, that's all the middleware. Jeez, now we can write out 1 million endpoints. All right. So let's check it out. Let's use some of these things. What do we want to use here? Dealer's choice. How you feeling, Greg?
So we want to start. Let's finish with the get. Let's do the get, I think.
All right. We'll do all the gets. So we got get slash, we got get ID. Let's get ID posts.
Yes. So with these right here, we check in to see if the post is correct, which would be the last one, validate post. Use that middleware.
Oh, you know what?
Line 80 needs to be post, or I mean text, right? Instead of name.
Sorry?
Thank you.
Line 80.
Thank you. Correct.
Good call.
Good catch. Checking the body, and we checking the text. Text is here. Post is here. Okay, I think that's correct. Now, what were you saying, Ian?
Oh, I'm just looking through the project and just figuring out how do we even get these posts.
So we passed in the validation for the post, check to make sure the post is correct. And then we have to remove resource. Oh, yeah.
Oh, here we go. So, all right. So here's what I'm realizing is that this is not the most up to date, and we need to just look at user DB.
Okay, so get user posts.
Yeah, exactly. So that's easy enough. He's already got this thing built out. And then if you look at all this scary, hairy stuff down here, this is JavaScript, but it's simulating structured query language. So this is how you make requests to your database. You're saying database, I want this post table as P, users table. We're joining these tables. We're selecting these fields where the user ID is equal to user ID. Oh my gosh. You guys are going to love structured query language. It's so much fun.
Oh, interesting.
So this is what's going to be returned when you call this function. And so we already know, oh, hang on. So actually, what we actually need to validate is the user ID, because it's the user ID that we're actually dealing with here. This is going to get us a list of posts by the user.
Okay. So according to ID, okay.
Yeah, so first thing we need to do is swap out our middleware. We need to be checking for a valid user ID before we call this. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, instead of validating a post, we need to make sure our ID is correct.
So we have to put in, so we need to put in two of them. We need to validate the, we need to what? Validate the user and validate the post?
Nope, just the user ID. So we're only getting information here. We don't need to validate the post information. We need to validate the user ID.
Okay. So we need this one. All right, I'm trying to understand that, just so I could be correct. So we passing in the user, we passing in the validation, and this validation is going to validate to make sure the ID is correct, and if it's correct, it allows us to get the post.
Yeah, so we just need to call this function right here.
So then that means that we would do user db dot get user post, get user post, right? Yeah. And then we would pass it in the parameter of the user ID. But then before that, we would have to equate the user ID to the rec.params.id, correct?
It's already on rec.params.id, so you can literally just write that between these parentheses.
What, rec.params.id?
Yeah. Yeah, for declaring variables, that really becomes super helpful if you have to use the same thing a bunch of times in a row and you don't want to type out the whole thing every time. But for this, we're really only doing one thing with it. So it don't take that much code to just write it. We can just pass it directly in there.
So
Dot
then,
net, dot catch.
yeah.
Set up our success and failure. Is this getting repetitive yet? Is it in your finger?
It's getting there. It's definitely getting there. Especially this part. Res dot status. Validating the ID, so that's 200 for successful. And then .json. And then we passing in, not an array, but we passing in, not that either. There we go. No, we don't need to pass that in. We just pass in the user ID.
Well, hang on a second. Let's think about where we're at in the code here. So line 31, we're calling the database. And we're passing in the ID right there. This code runs. It's going to return this as post. So this is actually, I would say posts with an S, because this is going to be all the posts from that user ID.
Right.
Potentially a whole bunch of them.
So then that means that we passing in those posts so they can come back in a JSON format.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And then dot catch. Error.
I don't know if this is accurate or not, but I kind of feel like working on backend servers like this is kind of equivalent to plumbing. It's like setting up all these little pipes and little data flows.
I would say more like electricity. Being an electrician, you wiring up everything so it can flow correctly.
All right.
Res dot status. And if it's an error, 500 dot JSON. And then we pass it the object, boom. And I don't think there is a message already. So we do a message. And that message is, so we validating the user ID. So we say this ID doesn't exist, or the ID is invalid. No, the ID doesn't exist.
Well, there's some kind of server with the error. So we know the ID exists because the middleware is handling that. So you could just say, error getting posts.
Okay.
Because this is going to be something pretty serious. It's not like I'm missing this or I'm missing that. This is like the server is choking and for some reason not operating correctly.
Spell post correctly, retrieving. All right, we ain't doing all that. There we go. All right, cool. So the validation is there. It's gonna validate the user, and once it validates the user, it will, if it's successful, it'll allow you to attach to the database. It will run this method. It will pass in the ID, and this will be our response. If it's successful, and this is our response if there's an error. So cool. All right. So let's test it.
Let's test out this get to ID posts.
Okay, so we're doing ID post. So that's what we'll get. Get / users / ID POSTS. Okay. And we get 4
All right.
user 5. All right, here we go.
Oh, user 5 got a whole lot of posts. Mithrandir.
Oh yeah.
I don't know who Mithrandir is. Does anybody know? Is that one of the trees?
I don't know.
Gandalf. Mithrandir is Gandalf? How does Gandalf have 2 names? It's his elvish name. That's like Gandalf's street name when he's hanging out with the elves?
I don't know anything about the hobbits.
Well, as I push up my glasses, I'll remind you that Gandalf was a wizard.
Okay, cool. So now.
Not even a chuckle out of that one. He said, okay, cool. He's not a wizard? All right, we've opened up a can of worms here. Gandalf is immortal. He came back from the dead. Sorry. What's next? We got the posts from Mithrandir.
All
right, so we got all the Git endpoints done. I think let's take a break and then let's focus on the post endpoints. How's that sound?
That sounds good to me.
Cool.
That sounds good.
We'll make it a quick 5 minutes.
Okay. Stop sharing my screen so you can post that out.
Cool. And hopefully we'll all have forgotten about Lord of the Rings by the time 5 minutes is up here.
Awesome.
right, back at it, wiring up the electrics.
Okay, so now we're looking at the post. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, I'm just
Okay.
checking out the instructions over here on the other page. Yeah, can you share your screen? I can't see anything.
I keep forgetting. All right, there we go. Cool, we're back at it. So we did that. We did all the validation, so we don't even need to look at that. We just need to look at this.
Yeah, middleware's good to go. So let's see. This is our user router. So we know what we're going to use this for is to post a new user.
So that would be this one right here.
Yep, perfect.
So to post a new user, okay, as far as we don't have to validate the user, we just because we create a new user.
Well, hang on. We don't need to validate the ID, but this other function that we wrote on line 68, that's what we're going to use because that's what we need. We need to validate that the data coming from the client has the required fields.
Correct. Okay, so that'll be the first thing that we pass in.
Yep, just dump that middleware right in there.
And then since that's the validation and it validates the body already, so all we need to do is now connect it to the database.
Absolutely.
User DB and insert. And inserts a user. Function takes in a user. And then we would do a then.
Yep, .then .catch. So the big question here is, where is our user coming from? Where does that data exist?
So where does the user data exist?
Right, so in our middleware, we're validating something. What are we validating with this validate user?
The
middleware?
body. Validate user, we validating the body.
Rec.body, the request body.
Uh-huh.
So that's where it lives. So you can be confident that it's got all the right stuff. So you can just call it by name, rec.body. And that's what you're going to pass into your insert function.
Then user where's that status 200 JSON or no. Yeah, that then the user. So then we want the user information in a JSON format.
So for a creation, we want to use 201. And that's just a specific HTTP code that means you've created some data.
Okay. But we passing in the right information, because once that's passed in, then we saying we want the user, if it's correct, we want to execute this for the user. So that's what we passing into the JSON, correct?
So here's what's going on, is you're calling the database, and then with the response from the database, which is this user, then you're sending a status code 201 and putting that user data into the JSON object. So yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly what you want. And if you look here, Luis has got this set up really nicely where he's going to insert the user, and then he's also going to get that user data. He's running this other function, get by ID, newly created ID, and he's returning that. So this is beautiful. Yeah.
So it's going to return the user data and the user ID.
You're going to get back the whole user object, all the information. So cool. Yeah, you're sitting pretty. You already validated this data. You know it's going in right. Luis has got this set up for you perfect, so you could just drop it back like that, not catch any errors, and this endpoint is done.
Error. Res.status at a 500 with a JSON formatted message object. Okay. So now we're on to the next one. So now we would have to validate the post. So now we need to look at validate post. This one right here.
All right, so here's what I'm thinking about this. Let's look at our file structure here. Right now, we're working in this folder called users. We got this other folder called posts. Let's pop this open. What's in here? Bam!
Oh.
An exact duplicate set of helper functions and routes. But it's not an exact duplicate. Let's take a look. What's the actual difference here? Post router, we're getting delete, put, validate post ID. Okay, so and then let's look at the post DB. Let's look at our helper functions here. Get by ID, insert, update, and remove. Okay, so what this looks like to me is that if we're going to be making posts for this user, we're probably going to have to link in to this post router and use these post DB functions. So let's see, inside of our user router, how does he have this set up? What are we asking for? That in the endpoint that we're about to fill in here, what are we looking at exactly? He is saying,
where's it at?
Okay, here, line 17.
Yep.
Router.post to an ID/posts. What does that mean? What is he intending with that?
That we should be able to post. We should be able to post, create posts according to the user's ID. According to this ID. we should create posts. We should be able to create posts. So then I'm thinking that we have to validate. So no, we're creating. So if we're creating, then it would validate the ID first. Correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we want to validate the ID, but then we also want to validate the posts.
So that means that we need 2 middlewares in there.
Yeah, let's give it a shot.
So, okay, I'll leave that for now. We'll work on this for now. Okay. So that means that
we can use the ones we already have.
Yeah. So we have to use validate user ID and then validate posts. Yeah, validate user ID and then validate the posts.
Yep. So let's see if this works. I haven't actually tried the syntax. I don't know if we can just chain middlewares, but we're gonna try it, see if it works.
Well, we should be able to, because it's optional, we should be able to put as many middlewares in there as we need.
Sounds good. I agree with that opinion. We're gonna test it.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Okay, so at this point, we're assuming that we've got a good rec.params.id, and we've got a good rec.body. So what are we talking about is putting a post in here. How the heck do we do that? Well, not through the users DB, but through this post DB. So what is the post DB doing? Insert posts.
So then we connect it to the database, and then we use this function, and then we pass in the post. But where is the post coming from? That would be rec.body.text. That's how we would create it.
Well, it's going to be on rec.body. So rec.body is going to be that object that has all the information that the database needs for that post.
Okay.
So yeah, you're exactly right. We need to import this into our user router, and then we need to use this insert function the same way we've been using the other stuff from the user DB.
So to import it, we would have to go to const post DB, give it that variable name, and then we will require it, and we would give it the pathway, and the path for that should be 2 dots in post, and then we get the DB in there. Cool. All right, cool. But we also need to import the router into the server as well too.
All we need from PostDB is just that one function.
Okay.
So just the same way we're doing this, we're just going to do postdb.insert.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm looking in the documentation, and he does have a database schema. So this is what we've already validated in our middleware, but the post needs to have a text field that's required. The post also needs to have a property called user ID. So this is great. We got to do one extra step before we call our database, but let's write the database call. Let's just write it as we're calling it. So postdb.insert. Let's see. Reed, what are you pasting in the chat here? What's going on?
So I think that we would do something like this. Let's see. And we need the text. And I think what, user ID? And then pass those in? Or we just pass in rec.body?
Okay, so yeah, we just pass in rec.body. We're going to do some other stuff, but right now let's just write this. And then we'll handle the other stuff. So this is going to be the same boilerplate that we've been writing. We're just passing in rec.body, and then we got a .then.catch to handle success and failure.
.then. Post. Status. And we're creating, so it's 201. And JSON. And then we pass in post.
Beautiful. See, having this middleware just makes the function so clean. You don't have to worry about all this logic. It's just like, just give it the instructions, insert it, and then return it to the user. It's so simple. It's kind of nice being an electrician. You don't have to worry about what color the paint is. Does it match the curtains and the carpet? Is the couch too big? Man. You don't have to worry about none of that.
Nope, you gotta make sure you just wire it up correctly. And you wire it up correctly and wire it to your source, then you working. .json. Pass that in. Message object. Boom.
Reed says, except if you wire it wrong, you die. But that's the nice thing about working with code is that nobody's going to die from this code.
You might lose your job, but you ain't going to die.
Right? I used to work in a kitchen, man. You might lose a finger.
Bruh, that was my profession prior to this. I was in the kitchen, 4-star, a 4-diamond hotel, and a major hospital.
That's intense.
Very intense.
Yeah.
A lot of work.
Where are you located? What part of the country?
Oh, I'm based in Stone Mountain, Georgia now, but I just moved down here from Philadelphia.
Cool.
Yeah. All right, cool. So that's done. This is done. So now let us check it. Let us check and see if we were right.
Okay, so there's one extra step. So I told you we were going to work forwards and then backwards. So, all right, so we're validating the user ID, and we're validating the post data. And then what we need to do is we actually need to put the user ID on the request body to match the data schema that the database is expecting to receive.
So then that means we need to const. No.
So what
the
we
user
need to
ID is
do,
rec.params.
yeah, pretty much. We just need to say rec.user_ID is assigned the value of rec.params.id.
Rec.user_ID.
Yeah, because that's in the data schema. So that's on the README for the main project page. And so it's kind of easy to miss. It's all the way at the bottom, right above the stretch goals. And he's got this table set up for you. So he's saying, so for a post, this ID field is going to be generated by the database, so you don't have to worry about that. Text field is required. We're validating that inside of our middleware. And then user ID is also required, and it must be the ID of an existing user. So we've taken care of that. And then all we have left to do is just put it on the object. So that's what we're doing right here.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't need a const because rec already exists. So we're using dot notation to manipulate the request object.
Okay.
So we're saying, hey, request object.user is assigned the value of rec.params.id.
Right.
And then we got this handy middleware. We've already validated that all that stuff is correct, so we don't need to worry about any of that. We can just give it clear instructions. Hey, do this. Put the ID number on the request body.
So,
or sorry, request.body.user ID.
Yeah.
What it has to be. You got it.
Yeah, I was getting ready to say then we would have to pass that into it. So
hang on. So rec.params.id was correct. So rec.params.id is this information that's coming from the URL. So that has to be params right there.
So that means we have to pass it in somehow.
It's already there. This is the beauty. This is the magic. Rec.params.id already exists. It's right here. It's being taken in by your URL. So the thing that we need to change.
Go ahead.
The thing that we need to change is this just needs to be rec.body.user_ID.
Oh, to put it onto the body. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. We need to go one layer deep into the request object to the request.body. And then so we're adding an extra field called user ID, which is required. And it must be the ID of an existing user, which is this, which has already been validated by this. Beautiful. Good to go. So we're putting it on the body, and then we're returning it. Oh my gosh. I'm excited. Let's test this thing. Let's see this thing work, man.
I just want to understand the logic just like that. All right, so let's change this to a post request. And now we're creating a post. So if we do that, then we have to put it in the JSON format. And then we need to pass in user ID. So
actually, the server's taking care of that.
Okay, so that's cool.
So
that's right, because we put it in there. Yeah,
yep.
So we need text.
That's it. Make it real easy.
And we could do it on user 6. Cannot read the property of text.
Of undefined. All right, so this is coming from validate post. Let's get a line number if we can here.
Yep.
We stretch it out. Or we could just scroll. You get a little scroll bar down here.
Whoa, that's way off.
Number
98.
98. All right, so let's check it out. It's in our validate post middleware.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you tested validate user earlier. I don't think you did because right now, like I'm stuck on validate user and it's just telling me that I have like it's missing data, even though I'm giving it the correct body.
All right, so let's test that out. I mean, we're on validate post right now, so let's concentrate. We basically copy and pasted the same thing. So we probably got the same bug in each piece of the code. So let's see, it's saying line 98 cannot get text of blah, blah, blah. So let's figure this out. Let's console log before any of this happens. Let's just console log rec.body and just take a look at it. What the heck are we even dealing with?
All right, so the console log rec.body in the post. So let's do a request and let's look at what we got on the console.
All right, so we got some big nasty errors. Let's scroll up and see what's happening here. Cannot read property text of undefined.
So it's not giving us anything, and it says now 99.27.
So rec.body is undefined.
So rec.body is undefined, so therefore we won't be able to look at it.
Why is it undefined? Let's think about this. What's happening here? So let's take a look at Insomnia again. What are we exactly sending here?
Text.
We're sending what looks to be a perfectly shaped JSON object. Looks pretty nice.
And according to that, we send in the correct key.
So, right, that should be fine. And then let's take another look. Can we stretch this out and just double check the URL we're sending to? Although that should have nothing to do with it because everything that it's dealing with should be right here. And it said can't read property text of undefined. So why is the request body undefined?
Let's ID post. So the URL. Let's see the post. POS TS correct. ID correct. Localhost 5000. So we can get in the server. Boom, boom, boom. Insert correct. Credit status 200. All of that is formatted correctly. So it means that text that doesn't have any kind of information.
I think maybe this is redundant of me to say, but in general, your post, when it's getting passed into validate user, like the validate users isn't even receiving that object that's like in Insomnia. So there's something we got to do with that validate user or validate user post. It's basic in general. What I'm trying to say, it's the middleware for sure, but I'm not sure how to fix it.
Validate user.
Yeah, I'm wondering if this is because we chained two middlewares together.
No, I don't think it's that, because with my validate user thing by itself, I'm still getting undefined. Like
Really?
validate user isn't even receiving rec.body. So maybe we have to do something like some sort of get or something to receive that data from like Insomnia or whatever your test platform is.
Aren't we just passing validate user ID and validate post in the route we're trying to hit though?
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, validate user ID and then validate post.
Could I take a look at the server.js real quick? Sorry, I don't mean to just kind of jump in here.
No, please jump in. Let's figure this bug out, because I'm not exactly sure what's happening.
What? I think I see what could be wrong here.
What do you got?
What do you think?
I'm going to. I think we need to server.use express.json. We got to throw that in there. Hold on, I'm going to send it.
Any of these,
Are
any of these working? None of these are working?
All the rest of them were working. We got to that point, it wasn't working. So when we're creating, if we put the server.use express JSON, we telling what to create it in a JSON format.
Jamie has it. That's exactly
I just posted it to our chat. So in our Zoom chat, if you can grab that and post it under your const server equal express. And yeah, basically, that's what we're saying. We're saying express, make this JSON.
Awesome. Good find, Jimmy.
Thank you.
Teamwork. Making the dream work.
So we're saying, I didn't look in the chat. Let me look in the chat.
Yeah, so it's the same syntax we're already using here. We can think of that as like another piece of middleware. We're going to say server.use express.json. But we need to do it before the router hits. So we need to do it up above line 7 there.
Yeah, it's working for me now.
Always test your code.
I know we got overzealous. It just takes so long to build. Sometimes I get lazy. I just want to build stuff. Oh my gosh, it's working now.
Yeah.
Thanks to all the bug stompers out there. Nice job spotting the express.json dependency, missing that crucial dependency.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right, so, geez, what the heck else did we build? We built so much stuff, man. So is that?
If that's working, then the other validation is working as well too. Cool.
Beautiful. So, all right, let's fill in these last couple of endpoints here. What else we got grayed out? Ooh, delete and put.
Yeah, delete and put.
All right.
Let's see let's do put first so we can update.
Beautiful. Let's do it.
Okay.
So this looks like we're updating a user. So really all we can update on the user object is the name. But we need to pass it in 2 parameters.
The ID and the changes.
Yep.
So if we're updating the user, then we're using the user DB.
Absolutely.
And we are doing an update, passing in the parameters of ID and changes. And the ID should be coming from rec.params.id, correct?
That's right.
Okay. This is going long.
Ooh. And then changes is going to be coming from the request body.
All right. So with that, then we should be able to do the normal routine.
.then.catch.
.then.
And then we're also going to stick in 2 pieces of middleware.
.then.catch. So putting update in. So update. Do getting sloppy. Res.status. So should we do 200? We should do 200 so to make it successful because we're not creating, so we don't need 201. JSON. And then
I guess it depends on your personal philosophy or your personal perspective. You could say that a change is a creation. Or you could just do the normal standard victory dance. That's up to you.
We're going to go with that one for now. We'll do a catch. And error. Space. Boom. That. Res.status. We'll go with 500. .json. And pass in message parameter. Message object. Okay. All right, so let's test it. No, we gotta pass in the middleware to validate. So we gotta validate, we're validating the post now. So if we're validating of the post, then we pass in this one right here. Validate the body and the text.
So hang on, what are we actually updating? We're updating a user. Well, we're not inserting a user, but we're working on a user. So we're gonna validate
the user.
Yeah. And also the user ID. So validate user ID and validate user. Double the middleware. All of the fun. Wes John keep posting pictures of Revenge of the Nerds out here in the lobby. I'm loving the tri-lambs.
Validate the ID. Validate ID. That's correct one. You can really get lost in this stuff. All right, cool. So now we're doing a put request with the ID backslash. All right, let's make sure we're not getting no errors. All right, we're running. Cool. All we need is the ID. So we have to pass in the ID, and then all we need is text on that as a header.
So let's see. We're updating a user, so this is going to be.
Oh yeah, I keep thinking that.
Yeah, we're updating the name.
Why I keep thinking about the text?
Because they're exactly the same. It's the exact same workflow. It's just semantically different. But I think this is effective, you know, because it's like forced repetition.
Tell me about it. Eventually it'll stick.
Well, I think you got a pretty good hang of it. It's just a lot of stuff to do. It's a lot of steps to take.
Yeah, you just got to remember the steps and what to do before what import goes where and things like that. So that's true. That's a truthy value because it equates to 1. So if it equates to 1, that means it's a truthy value, and we can check by going to get users, and then look at number 1, and number 1 is updated. So
Good Jordan, he's in there.
Yeah, we're looking good. I've now become a hobby.
So, oh my gosh.
All right, so the last thing on this one is delete. All righty then, so let's look at the delete situation.
Yeah, so I think we just, need to look at the DB helpers.
Remove by ID.
Easy as that. So simple.
So question, we should pass in the middleware of validate the user by ID?
Yep, yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
User DB dot remove passing ID. So if we're passing in ID, in order to get the ID, we need to pass in rec dot params dot ID. No, don't do that to me. Dot ID. Cool. And from here we should be able to do dot then and user res dot status show that it was successful at 200. I'm probably gonna remember these numbers now. JSON. Then we passing in a message to say
so I'm gonna paste a link in the channel. This is a nice little cheat sheet for the HTTP status codes.
So, successful. Alrighty then. And from there, we come down and go to the dot catch. The error. As dot status 500 dot JSON. That's a message object. And say cool. Now validated the middleware is on there. We passed in the correct parameter for the ID, so it can grab the ID. We did our then and catch correctly. Okay, now let's test it.
Awesome.
So delete. Let's use this one. 5,000. Users. Let's delete me.
Oh no. Dang, you're no longer a hobbit.
Thank God.
Been freed. You're in a better place now, Greg. Cool. So that's looking pretty good. The last part of the MVP really is to build out the posts router. So really, it's just kind of more of the same. It's just wiring up a few different imports. You're going to rewrite the same middleware. So does this make sense? You feel like you could tackle this on your own?
Yep, I do.
And maybe I'm just reading it wrong, but I think the post router is actually stretch.
Oh.
I might be wrong though, but that's what.
No, it's definitely stretch.
You're absolutely right. Dang, so we did it, y'all. This MVP. Did we test everything? Everything works, right?
Add the post router, implement all the endpoints and middleware within the post router. So I have one question about that, and then I think I am done. So with that, that means that the router itself would be imported into the server, The router would be imported right here into the server. And then once it's imported in here to the server, then we would go to, where was it at?
It's on the server. So,
yeah, and so then we do server.use so we can use it. Okay, all right, so I'm gonna do the stretch.
Yeah, man, that's good reps, dude, honestly. I mean, geez, just the MVP was good reps, but yeah. The exact same flow. You just set up a router for a different endpoint, fill in all that stuff. Beautiful. And then if y'all are the true believers, create React app. My goodness.
And that's going to be my weekend project. I'm going to do a couple of those because I need to wire the front end to the back end so I don't forget how to use React.
This is the full stack. We've made it.
Yeah,
deep in the full stack.
I know this is winding down, but one question I did have about the stretch. So when you do the server.use for the post and post router, one thing I was kind of having a hard time with was a lot of them have the same endpoints. So like the get and post router and the get and user router are just both a root route. So is there a way to differentiate it, or does that make sense what I'm asking?
Oh, well, I'm trying to understand what you're asking.
Yeah, I don't really know how to ask it.
So you're talking about setting up 2 routers.
Well, I don't know. Is that what you need to do, or?
Yes, that is what you need to do. So I think if I'm understanding your question, you're asking about this, right?
Well, and just the rest of the routes too, like /ID. We already have that in the user router. We have all those routes in the user router already. So,
awesome question. Okay, so let's look at server.js. So this is what is actually happening. Is that route is not actually /, it's /users. And if we set up our